Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be talking about the 1986 Stallone vehicle, Cobra. That's right, Cobra. The film is directed by George P. Cosmatos. It's written by Sylvester Stallone based on a novel by Paula Gosling. It stars Sylvester Stallone, Brigitte Nielsen, Rennie Santoni, Andrew Robinson, Brian Thompson, John Hertzfeld, Lee Garlington, Art LaFleur, Marco Rodriguez, and others. The synopsis is: a tough on crime street cop must protect the only surviving witness to a strange, murderous cult with far reaching plans. All right, so this was an interesting one. I have not seen Cobra since I was probably like 12. I probably saw it like on TBS or something like that, some sort of cable channel full of commercials and cutting out all the good stuff. And I was very curious to revisit it. This actually, pro tip, right now Walmart has a bunch of Scream Factory and Shout Factory movies for reasonable prices. So if you're a collector, go check out your local Walmart. Because I got this, I got the Fly box sets for like $40. It's usually like 60 or $70 on Amazon. So a lot of good stuff there, a lot of good deals. But like I said, I hadn't seen this in a while. I was really, really curious to revisit it. I've been kind of on a older movie kick. You know, I've been kind of just going back and either filling in gaps that I have or reassessing kind of some older movies of my youth. And Cobra was kind of in that vein. What did I think about Cobra? What did I think about Cobra in 2020? Well, it's got a lot of great stuff in it. It's a little messy, apparently, and we'll get into this. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama and post-production drama with the movie, which I think obviously affected the final product. Apparently, there's a work print that's been floating around for years in fan communities that's about 30 to 40 minutes longer, and it actually smooths out the story. It's not just violence that they cut out of the movie. It's actually plot elements, because they tried to cut it down to its most bare essentials so it could be competitive in the theaters at the time. And apparently Stallone, kind of a prima donna at the time, a little bit of an ego on him. He basically, as the legend goes, kind of shadow directed this movie. He had worked with George P. Cosmatos before this. George P. Cosmatos had directed Rambo First Blood Part 2. So they were familiar with each other, and I'm assuming that's why he was hired to direct Cobra. But I guess Stallone just pretty much just took over, and Cosmatos was more of like relegated to a producer role, and probably had to do with kind of the visual aspects of the movie and the way it looks. But yeah, it was directed by Stallone, and it kind of shows. You know, if you go and watch something like The Expendables, would be a good example of something where you're just like, just this kind of shallow, testosterone, machismo dripping movie and characters where the characters are kind of like just stereotypes, kind of like cartoon characters. It reminded me a little bit of a movie that I reviewed a few weeks ago, the one with him and Billy D. Williams, Nighthawks, which kind of have the same air to it. Some of the same problems with Stallone and behind the scenes. Him kind of being demanding and jealous, and I don't know. I guess he just wasn't a great team player during the production. Even so much so that the the director of photography, Rick Waite, had to kind of tell him off, because he was, Stallone was a producer on the movie, and he was like, we gotta tighten up. This is taking too long to shoot, and he was trying to blame Rick Waite for it, and Rick Waite was just like, yo, dude, maybe if you could keep your hands off of Brigitte Nielsen's ass and show up for work on time wouldn't be an issue. And I guess that kind of backed Stallone off a little bit, kind of humbled him for a minute or two. But yeah, it's an okay movie. It's got a cool concept. I actually really like kind of this, the framing of it all. It's a kind of a serial killer slasher thriller, police procedural action movie. It's got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of different layers, a lot of different kind of genre melding going on. Because it's like I said, it's got that horror movie aspect, but it also has kind of a tough cop movie aspect to it as well. I mean, Cobra is a ridiculous character in kind of the best way. He's so one note. He's so He's like too badass. He just from the way he dresses to the way he handles himself to the dialogue. There's a great scene early on in the movie where he comes home after the opening scene, which is probably the best scene in the movie. Is there's a shootout in a grocery store with some psycho, and he goes home and he goes to get some food and clean his gun, and he like keeps his like black leather gloves on while he's eating pizza, and he like cuts the pizza with scissors to make it like a little bite size for him. You know, Cobra don't want to choke. Cobra can't choke. It's just really funny. It's really funny in the way that it is just so try hard badass guy, you know. But I think that is part of the appeal of the movie, honestly. It does feel like something from a bygone era. It feels very specific to the time it was made. It's almost like a caricature of something that Stallone would have made at the time. But I guess a lot of Stallone movies, you know, if you start even think about the Rocky movies, they all kind of get down into that area where it's just kind of this reductionist take. Everybody's kind of cartoonish archetypes. The stories stop feeling sincere. The characters become monoliths. And they cease to be interesting at some point. Same thing with Rambo. Which I like, you know, overall I actually kind of like the Rambo series. All of the movies for different reasons, but by the time you got to, especially like in the 80s when you got to Rambo 3, like he was just a kind of an anonymous stock action hero, you know, which is a shame because he starts in such an interesting place. I've always been of the mind that they should have never have franchised Rambo. First Blood is such a perfect little movie on its own, this perfect little action thriller that actually has some depth and has some pathos, and Stallone gives a great performance. I kind of wish they had left well enough alone and not turned it into these big over-the-top action movies of the time, you know, because the same thing, Arnold was doing the same thing, you know, making movies like Red Heat and whatnot, Commando. This would be more closer to Commando than it is to a good action movie. I mean, I like Commando, don't get me wrong. I like Commando for a lot of the same reasons I like something like this. It is just what it is. And it's not self-aware. It doesn't realize how silly it is. Maybe Commando's winking at you a little bit more, but I got the sense from watching this that they thought they were making the coolest fucking movie ever. Things I liked about the movie, though, other than just kind of the novelty aspect of it, was the production design, the cinematography. I mentioned Rick Waite. He does a great job with this movie. He gives it kind of like this cool, almost like neon drenched at times, shot composition and lighting that was really neat. And it's funny because I'm a fan of George P. Cosmatos' son. His son is also a director in the modern era. He did Beyond the Black Rainbow, and most recently, and which kind of caught on, was Nicolas Cage's starring vehicle, Mandy. And if you watch Mandy and then you watch Cobra, I see a lot of similarities. I see a lot of similarities in the way they shot those movies. And it was interesting to me, just the kind of the use of shadow and the way they would use kind of like these off-camera, almost unmotivated, like red lights, and this kind of hazy, dreamlike quality to some of the movie. It's really interesting from that perspective, and it's probably the thing that I end up enjoying the most about the movie, aside from some of the fun performances and the just testosterone-drenched machismo that is just, I mean, Stallone is like moist throughout the entire movie. He's a moist boy. He's just sweating manliness. And it makes it super entertaining. I'm not going to say Cobra is a good movie, or I wouldn't even say it's in my favorite movies of all time or anything like that, but I did enjoy my time with it. I think it's worth revisiting if you haven't seen it in a while. And just you have to go in understanding what it is. If you go in there looking for kind of a straight movie, you're going to be disappointed, because it seemed like the vision was maybe, and this was part of the conflict between Stallone and George P. Cosmatos, was it seems like it's like this pop sleaze movie. It's like this bridging the gap between like 70s and early 80s sleaze movies with something more mainstream. Because I love a good cult movie. I love a good movie when somebody's fighting occultists. I enjoy that. and I enjoy that aspect of this movie, even though it gets pretty silly by the end, once the kind of cult reveals itself, and the way they do business is a little it's a little silly, but silly in a fun way, in a cartoony way that I appreciated. I wonder what it would be like if there was a straighter version of this movie. Like if somebody had done like a good version of Cobra, like not in the 80s way. And there's so many 80isms in this thing. I mean, there's like I think there's like three montages that are set to some sort of like awful adult contemporary 80s music as Marion Cobretti is like down hunting the streets. It's just interesting. It's got the most interesting thing about Cobra is probably the production history of the movie, because originally, if you don't know, Stallone was set to do Beverly Hills Cop. Beverly Hills Cop was conceived as a much different movie than the one we got with Eddie Murphy, and through the process of production, Stallone went in and heavily changed the script, and so much so that the producers of Beverly Hills Cop were like, well, this is not what we had in mind. So they kind of parted ways, and then he finds this book, and then he kind of heavily cribs from the book and also takes all the ideas he had for Beverly Hills Cop and basically makes Cobra. And it's interesting to think about like what Beverly Hills Cop became, and then what Cobra became, and what Beverly Hills Cop could have been. It would have been a wildly different movie, like I said, and it wouldn't have worked either, because the things that work about Beverly Hills Cop are certainly not the plot. That's not what's interesting about Beverly Hills Cop. And I would say in Cobra, what makes Cobra interesting or worthwhile is kind of the full package. It is the ludicrous plot. It's the ridiculous characters, and they come together to make something that's kind of special and interesting. I kind of wish this had turned into a franchise because of the character Marion Cobretti. You could just see they could have made a million movies with this character. He's kind of like this almost a Judge Dredd, Dirty Harry type guy, where he's like a tough cop who does what he has to do, and he's always fighting with his leadership, and whoa, hair's going crazy. Always fighting with his leadership, and always like saying like, "Oh, you just care about your budget, man. I'm out here on the streets, adjudicating justice." It was a good time. I enjoyed it. Like I said, though, I think it's kind of a missed opportunity. I would actually really like to see the longer cut. I'd like to see the work print cut. I even did a little internet sleuthing myself to try to see if it was out there. You know what I mean? See if you could find it out there. And I could not find anywhere to get a hold of it, but I'd definitely be interested in seeing it. So if anybody out there knows where you can find the work print for Cobra, I'd totally be interested. Apparently, some of the stuff ends up in the TV versions. If you, because famously, when a network would get a movie, sometimes they would have to make it longer. They would have to extend the runtime. So what they would do is add in deleted scenes and alternate takes. So sometimes when you'd watch the TV version of a movie, you'd actually see a different version of the movie. So there you go, little interesting factoid there for you. I would love to see it. I would love to see if the story actually kind of makes more sense, because as is, you can feel when you're watching it, you can feel that they stripped it down to the most bare essentials. Because none of the character arcs or even the plot itself, it feels a little incoherent and detached. There's a lot of dissonance there in between the things that happen and how the characters react. It's like you could tell that there's missing stuff. So it would be cool to see a fuller version of Cobra. I don't know or think that it would actually make the movie all that much better, but for posterity, just for being a film fan, I would love to see an alternate cut of Cobra. We should petition that. Release the Stallone cut of Cobra. Come on, everybody, get together. Let's go on petition.org and start something worthwhile. You know what I mean? Let's do it. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, you want to keep up with everything Zoobox, there are some links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram and my personal Twitter. Also, if you would like to see me review a movie during these daily videos, or maybe even end up on an episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies, our weekly deep dive movie show, throw it in the comments and I'll put it on the list. All right, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good night. Farewell. Cobra out.